Hello everyone, this segment is to let you know that this video contains a Stardock product and was made during the time that I was contracted as a content developer for Stardock Corporation, but was not made under that contract. Thank you for listening, please enjoy the video. Alright, hello everyone and welcome to round number 3 of our February Team FFA tournament. Once again we're featuring Blues, and then PB Head, Adderfield, and Steph Brzerlin this time around. And of course, Terra Incognita is still joining us. Dermis has had to step away for the rest of the tournament, so welcome once more.
Yep, thank you. Lots of well, there's clumped iron in the southwest, but not a whole lot of iron aside from that. In fact, none at all. So either we're going to see scavengers, and the carbon honestly isn't that great. There's one spot in the west, or we're going to see a bunch of HQs in this southwest corner.
Oh, PB Head wants a scavenger. No big surprise there. It's always been a preference of his. Gonna just get that low aluminum and secure the only real decent carb in this game. Blues, interestingly enough, drops second, and he chooses to take the very close water before anything else, then elects to start grabbing up his iron. We'll see what he does from there.
Yeah, I don't know if I like that. Just because water, I mean, it's a little bit of a shipping distance away, but there is a bunch of water in the middle of the map. I don't think it's going to be that valuable a resource in the long term. More of a problem, honestly, is the aluminum situation, and Adderfield goes for a completely, what I imagine is going to be a completely steel-less expansive. We'll see how that's going to go for him. He's relying on Blues and Steph to produce all of his steel. And Steph is a power robot, so I'm not sure about that.
There's a power robot. I'm really nervous about that. There is this idea that you could have founded without iron immediately at HQ1, tried to maybe get some water or silicon going, especially maybe some, try and move into some glass, just make it through HQ1, and then grab maybe some of this high iron at HQ2, or maybe even just a medium and a low. There's stuff to get into over there, but founding that far away, you've pretty much locked yourself away from it, and he's still going with the steel production, so I'm a little nervous for Adderfield at this point.
There's a very, very curious claim from PB Head at HQ2. He's claimed a geotherm. Now, A, there's a power robot, and B, power's at $37. That doesn't seem like a very high-value geotherm to me.
No, not at all. I do wonder if this is maybe a reaction to the fact he only has a low aluminum. Maybe the upgrade's going to be a bit more difficult, so he thinks he'll have this spare carbon sitting around. But I'm especially worried about it because carbon has already been nuked this game. 2K nuke came out from Adderfield right onto that carbon tile of PB's, and he's going to be lacking the carbon compared to what he'd like from here on forward.
Yeah, he's got a third tile that he could use if he wants to, but again, at that point, you're 3 remote claims with those carbon being in a crater away from his base. That's going to make it very difficult to do anything. One thing that is in favor of that is that chems have started at 44, so I wonder if we're going to see some patent labs relatively soon from some of these players. PB instead going into glass, which is going to make him a bunch of money.
Yeah, glass always worth paying attention to when there are warehouses on the board. Wow, nukes coming out from Blues onto the high iron tile. That is interesting to me. Really trying to get control of that iron market.
Yep, I think that's fair enough. Steph only has that 1 iron, so he's now working on a low iron. And Adderfield, of course, has no iron at all, with 2 steel mills. So Blue's in a really good position with that iron, it's basically a monopoly at this point. He's got Steph with that 1 tile. Steph's going to have to take another tile, and Adderfield claims that iron right there. It's so far away, even for an expensive. That's basically a diagonal across the map. And this claim auction is going crazy.
Yep, PB's going to be desperate for this one, and it's PB. He has no fear of debt, of course. Learned to play back when debt was no trouble whatsoever. I've lost to him at some point. When there was one particular map, it was an awful map, terrible map. He found it with like 150,000 debt and still managed to win the game. So that's the environment that he grew up in. He's never going to be afraid of taking these auctions. And not really surprised.
It's much less forgiving now. I'm not sure that this is going to work out for him. He's got the power online, so he's not going to get too much more debt. Although, to be honest, the food and the fuel is much more of an issue for him. He's shipping quite a bit. And obviously, as an expansive HQ3, he's going to be consuming a little bit of food as well. So even with that power surplus that he has, he's gaining debt rather than losing it.
Absolutely. One big concern I also have for PB that we didn't really touch on earlier is his found does not have a lot of room to spread out buildings, and he's against EMPs and slowdown strikes. So this is potentially going to be a huge issue for him later in the game. This fact that he really only has one direction that he can expand those secondary production buildings into, or he has to try and do something very strange like pick up teleportation just to have room to spread his base out a little bit and not be devastated by black market.
Yeah, I mean, a strong black market's good for a scavenger in most cases, but I think in this case, it's very difficult to see how he's going to be able to set up his base to be immune from those things. Blues first into the food market, albeit Adderfield just shortly behind him. Blues has I'm going to say, a big lead in this game right now. He's an expansive player who's quite significantly ahead of everyone else. He's ahead in upgrades and in terms of cash and resources. He's got that iron situation, which is going to be really good for him. And yeah, he's not shipping a whole lot. He's shipping a little bit of aluminum, but otherwise not a whole lot. And food and fuel is rising as well. So yeah, Blues in a really good position.
Absolutely. I would say the one weak point that I see for Blues right now is that underground nukes are available, and Blues, he's probably at next HQ level, maybe eyeing those reactors, and there is the potential for Blues to kind of upgrade, start getting situated, and then have his water nuked out. And I think that's something we're going to need to see moving forward. Otherwise, Blues is just going to have his fingers in too many pies at once for everybody else to be able to handle him.
Yeah, I feel like water's about to go crazy, though. Adderfield is putting reactors up as well without any water at all. So he's got 3 farms and 3 reactors. He's going to be leaking 6 water a second. He's not bringing any in whatsoever as the geotherm tile goes. And again, PB Head wants this too, despite already being in 88,000 of debt.
Well, sometimes you just got to ignore that red ink and sit there like, well, maybe I can use this to pull back into the game. You never know, but Adderfield looks like he's going to grab it for 14,000. Far more reasonable for him to take that geotherm in particular. So no real big surprise there, although geotherm's a bit expensive right now, even for our expansive players. $173 steel at the moment.
Yeah, and Adderfield, of course, not making any steel at all, although I imagine he will be very soon, maybe as soon as he upgrades, or maybe even before then. Because he does have that iron coming in at considerable cost right now. Blues, though, to 4, and as an expansive player with not a huge amount of debt, up against a robot and a scavenger. Again, that's just such a lot of money making potential. He does put those reactors down, as you suggested he might, and he looks to be in a really strong position. He doesn't have the water defended yet, though.
No, and I really want to see people get aggressive against this water. There are slowdown strikes, there are EMPs, there are underground nukes, there are network viruses even to stack onto this if Blues lets water get out of control. There are tools available this game to slow someone down, even with that runaway lead, and they're going to have to use them because Blues, there's no doubt that he is very far ahead of the competition right now.
He's put the second water claim down as well with the low just next to the high, and he's gooned his high as well. So yeah, he sees that as well. Water's already up above $100. It's now $140. So yeah, it's going to be expensive for a while. Adderfield is stockpiling it and using it to try and invest, I guess. But he's still HQ2. You need to upgrade, and he can't upgrade. It's still too expensive for him. 50,000 for that upgrade right now. So yeah, he's really struggling.
Worth noting that aluminum price has just gone nuts. I think we have one player collecting aluminum right now this game, and it's not like people don't have access to aluminum. Adderfield has access to aluminum. PB has access to aluminum. Steph could have taken it pretty easily, not very far away from his base, but everybody's passed up on it. And I have always said aluminum is the single most important resource in the game. Literally everyone needs it. Period. I've gotten a lot of flack for that, especially from Soren himself. We've gone back and forth on this quite a bit. But this is the kind of situation where you see the stranglehold that you can get over people if they don't have aluminum and you do. They just can't keep up in the upgrades. And Blues, he can hit 5 pretty much any minute now, as long as he just keeps his resources flowing in.
So look at Adderfield and what he's doing with those claims that he's got 3 claims on his sort of southeast that he's been rotating between, like farms and water pumps
and aluminum,
and now aluminum tiles.
Yep.
And that's, yeah, he's claiming 8 aluminum a second. That's going to be a whole bunch of money in very short order. He does need to upgrade, though, rather than having How much has he got? $48,000 in
And
electronics right
electronics,
now.
yeah. Take that
Yeah,
upgrade. Make it
and he
happen. Get
does.
those farms down. Farms, glass, whatever you want. Just something that's going to make you some money. Oh, it's going to be water pumps, apparently. Well, they're cheap.
So Blues is sitting on a whole bunch of money and can buy anyone that he wants to buy at any point if he doesn't take the HQ5 upgrade. And there's no reason why he would take the HQ5 upgrade. He's auto-selling aluminum and steel, and he's going into PB Head, who I don't think has the means to defend himself.
No, not right away. And only needs about 9,000 more. Might depend a little bit on these shipments. This is one of the big downsides of having your farms positioned so far away. Look, the money he
Yeah,
needs is
there they
flying
are.
through the air
It's in the
right
air.
now.
It's too late, though. Too
Yep,
late. 3
I-
seconds,
not
2
gonna get
seconds,
there.
1 second.
And Adderfield jumps in to finish it up. Blues, worth noting,
Oh.
did not have the cash necessary to finish off PB. If it hadn't been for Adderfield, PB would have survived. His farms would have gotten him that money in time. But those shipments, that just goes to show, having to position those buildings that far away, huge, huge problem. And of course, there was the option for somebody to pick up a magnetic storm, knock that food right out of the sky, just to make sure that PB went down.
Very interesting decision by Adderfield to do that as well. Not sure I like it at all. Just because you help Blues out so much, and Blues I think is the runaway leader in this game. Although Steph's up to HQ4 himself now, so and has a bit of money too. But just the fact that that subsidiary now exists for Blues, it's such a stock price bump. In the long term, it's going to be an income bump as well. I mean, there's reasons why Blues isn't going to be able to make it to the late game, potentially. He's in a whole bunch of debt. He needs that HQ5 upgrade at some point, because Steph is now HQ5 and is going to start to be thinking about off-world markets, potentially, which are okay this game. So yeah, we'll see whether Blues is able to sort of overcome that. He's not getting a whole bunch of... In fact, is he making steel at all? He's not right now. No. So, yeah, I wonder what he's going to do.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's working away at this patent lab. Interestingly enough, the solar condensers not really feeling too great at the moment. Might be thinking about getting out of them, but that, of course, has the chance of revealing where his patent lab is. Not something he's going to want to do. But overall, Blues just doesn't seem to have a lot going on, and it feels like he's going to need to make some changes here. I'm a bit surprised at the fact that we haven't seen even something like an additional solar panel come down, just to try and work off some of this debt. Got plenty of silicon saved up. Gonna need to see some changes out of him at this point.
Yeah, well, he's doing that with the steel right now, but he's in a slightly awkward position. So I think the awkwardness is caused by the fact that the solar panels, which he desperately needs right now to sort of keep away from that D level of debt, if at all possible, they're covering his iron right now. So it's really difficult for him to transition those tiles into iron, which is what he's going to need very, very soon, because that iron price is going to go up in a hurry.
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely causing him some issues here. Or at least some nervousness, it seems, about having gotten into that steel in the first place. Lots of chems bought up for Blues. That's a bit interesting. Just sitting on 400 of them at the moment.
Is interesting. What's he planning to do with that then? Is he making it? Because he's got nanotech going now. So is he just going to knock out as many patents as he possibly can? I guess he probably is.
I mean, there's just this advantage that you see somebody else has a patent lab down. You have a patent lab down. You're not making chems. They're not making chems. Nobody's making chems. Chems are going to go up in price. And you want to always be committing your money somewhere. Cash is the single most useless thing in this game. You want to commit that cash somewhere if you can find anywhere to put it. So Blues just identified, chems are probably either going up or I'm going to use them for the time being.
He's going into Steph as well.
Steph can defend himself.
He can, but he has to cancel this pleasure dome. He has to cancel this pleasure dome, and he does.
He's good. He's good. He got there.
He's got to sell all the resources down. You got to do it quickly. Okay, he did. Made me nervous just for a second there.
Yeah, Steph's all right. He got there. It's going to be okay. Adderfield not going to fall to a majority either without some pretty major mistakes. He's already secured 4. He's going to be okay. And on top of that, Adderfield, neither of these players should really be looking at him for the time being. Still back at HQ3, really, really struggling. It's really between Blues and Steph for the moment, and they're going to have to figure out how to deal with each other.
Yeah, just the fact that Adderfield's not making any steel. He's buying as much steel as he can while it's cheap, which is fair enough. But now Blues takes the upgrade, and suddenly steel jumps to $160 again. And it's really hard for Adderfield to get anything done whatsoever now. can Blues, he's going to get thinking machines by the looks of it. Can Blues make enough money with these extra claims that he's going to have as an expansive? And prices are decent, prices are okay. Can he make enough money to be able to see him through in this battle against Steph?
Well, underground nukes certainly going to help. Those are finally up to 6K. We have not seen enough nuking in this game, in my opinion, but hey.
Yeah,
We'll
the water situation, and again, that's something that Blues identified very early. He's even got a spy on that water. No love for the mule. It gets ignored in the auction. But Blues has very early on, focused on that water market. And at some point, I think it's going to pay off. It might only be a long-term payoff at this point in the era of off-world markets and the fact that oxygen is really the only viable launch. But it's been interesting for him so far. It's not really done, I think, all that he hoped it would, just because Adderfield is in the situation where he's swimming in water.
Absolutely. That's the one advantage to Adderfield's found location. So much aluminum and water available to him, and they have been extremely valuable resources this game so far. I do want to point out, there's maybe a little bit of a misstep from Blues here. He was transitioning away from his solar condensers and into chem refineries, and did it while there was an auction going on that nobody was really interested in. There was the potential there for somebody to go ahead and spot his hologrammed patent lab at that point and potentially punish him a little bit for it, but not something that we've seen just yet. But with dynamite, EMPs available, you got to be careful about making moves like that, as people will be looking to shut your patent labs down.
Yep, and Blues not defending his patent lab right now. Goons have reached 20k and dynamites are 3k, so perhaps that's not enormously surprising. Steph has a pleasure. So yeah, actually, this pleasure dome, we haven't talked about this pleasure dome. We probably should have by now, because it's really good, and he's going for virtual reality as well. 2 expansive players in this game. What's the colony at? Colony's at 12, so it's a reasonable size for this point in the game, and a scavenger player too. So 300 a second with power. Well, power was dead. It's not so dead anymore. But Steph's made a lot of money from that pleasure dome.
Yeah, and that's just going to keep going for the time being. As Adderfield continues to upgrade, that's going to add more cash to it. Once it picks up virtual reality, it's just going to be a fantastic little tile to have access to. So yeah, Steph's looking like he's still definitely solidly in this, despite the fact that Blues felt like he was off to such an early lead.
Yeah, he actually has a cash lead, or he did momentarily over Blues until virtual reality completed, at which point obviously the chems that he was using for that stopped counting. But it's going to be a little bit difficult to sustain, honestly. Blues is expansive. He also has half that subsidiary, which now is starting to pay a few dividends. 270 a second he's getting at the moment, which isn't a huge amount of money, but it's not nothing either.
Yeah, the other big deal, of course, with the subsidiary is this idea that even though our players aren't all that different when it comes to debt, 119 for Steph, 149 for Blues, Blues stock price is much higher, purely because he has those 6 stock already purchased, and that can make a serious difference when you're racing toward the end of one of these games.
And Blues into an Offworld, he's the first player to commit to the Offworld market, a fairly expensive Offworld, even as an expensive player, just because electronics are so expensive, that nearly 50k in electronics alone for that Offworld. So I think it will pay for itself very quickly. Launches are 46,000 right now, albeit that there's only one real viable launch in the form of oxygen. But certainly Blues is going to be making money from that soon. Steph also building an Offworld though.
Yep, electronics transition coming down from Blues. He is suffering from a slowdown strike right now. That was not targeted at the Offworld, so it might be a bit of an incidental hit here, but slowdown strike is coming down where Blues is trying to work on his electronics, which of course Steph is also competing for. Some of this may just come down to some spy play and strong black market use. There's still plenty of tools available to be fighting over these black markets, so a lot's gonna depend on exactly how attentive these players are to what each other are doing for who's gonna come out on top.
I want to point out a big mistake from Steph. He has thinking machines, and look at his Offworld market.
Yep.
Needs
Poorly
to
placed.
be next to the base. Needs to be next to the base.
Slowdown strikes available this game. That is a big problem, and a lot of that just comes down to the fact that the patent lab was not set up in a position long term to benefit from thinking machines. So maybe just a little bit of a misstep there from Steph early on, not compensating for it later. He wanted to benefit from that goon squad, which is understandable, but certainly not worth it in a game where you have slowdown strikes and network viruses with dynamite available. Just not a good call. Not a good call at all from Steph.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else that plays into his hands is the fact that Steph does have two spies on Blues. Unfortunately, they're in exactly the wrong places to spot his off-world market. And now he will get eyes on the second one though, so he'll know the second one is happening. So maybe that's a point of vulnerability for Blues. But at this point, Blues has a big lead, 250k in cash and resources, albeit that most of it is in that off-world. But also the stock price lead, also the fact that in fact, they're both in D levels of debt. In fact, everyone in this game is in D levels of debt right now. Yeah, Blues has a pretty big lead still.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody has any interest in paying down their debt. Very curious thing, this game. And it's such an important thing, too. You have to stay out of that D level in this game because underground nukes are available, EMPs available, slowdown strikes available, so on and so forth from there. There's just such a huge array of black market tools available that it's actually pretty inexcusable to be in a position where you are not allowed to use it. And I think keeping their heads above water are maybe something players have not put enough focus on as we move forward through this game. And maybe somebody paying off enough so that they don't have to keep paying through those interest ticks could make a pretty big difference long term as we head toward the end of this one.
Yeah, well, I think to some extent both players have been sort of riding the line between C and D. So whenever they've needed a black market cooldown, just pay a tick or two of debt off, and you're in C levels of debt, and you can use the black market again.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of it's just such an awkward thing to have to manage though, and the fact that you need that cash on hand. I mean, neither really have a problem with cash, but even so, it's something you don't really need to be dealing with.
Certainly. Adderfield has come back into this one pretty effectively. You can really tell that his access to aluminum and water has been a significant factor in this game. Also trying to work on that hacker array, make things happen. Has also managed to get into a pleasure dome. Certainly an important decision this game. Very surprised to see Blues go ahead and pass up on it here. Usually he's one of the ones that's on the ball with the pleasure dome. But Adderfield becoming a pretty major factor. Lots of cash on hand, although he does have a large amount of debt.
Oh, I'm not sure I agree with this decision, though. I'm not sure I agree with this decision. That's poking the bear. I don't think that's the thing you need to be doing.
No.
It's a whole bunch of money he's just used.
Seems as though he is trying to get Steph to maybe jump in, help him out, but I don't think you were quite in a position to make that happen as Adderfield at this point. Steph just doesn't have the cash on hand to fight with you for the time being. And on top of that, one of the reasons Adderfield has this huge clump of cash right now compared to Steph and Blues is Steph and Blues have both invested in the off-world markets long term. And so Adderfield, I understand he wants to try and get something done quickly at the moment because he knows that long term he's still at a pretty significant disadvantage, but I don't think that going after Blues was going to ever be a winning play right now.
No, I don't think it was at all. I think maybe buying your own stock up is the thing to do there and just hope that you can out-earn the others in the long term, even though it's going to be really difficult. But Blues now is at the purchase, believe it or not, of Adderfield. He just hit that 100% mark. He's just waiting for a little bit more income. He's not going to bother cancelling launches or anything like that. Just going to wait for it to tick up. And the fact that Blues now has a subsidiary and a half makes it very difficult for Steph to do anything. In fact, two, because Adderfield owned half of that. So yeah, this one's over.
Yeah,
Blues
this
wins.
is done. Period. No question. I mean, that subsidiary probably making a pretty significant difference here, as it was keeping Blue's stock price so high that it really wasn't possible to get aggressive against him in the stock market at any point for our other players. On top of that, Adderfield just a little too aggressive, a little too early, and being $320,000 in debt or so at the end of that game, making life easy on Blues. He'll go ahead and take that easy subsidiary, and look at how valuable it is, already pulling in more money than PB has this entire time.
Man. PB struggled in the early game. He says in chat, by the way, that he hit the button to buy the fifth of his own stock, but it didn't register. So unfortunate. I also want to point out that was the first time, and Steph's had a spy on that Offworld since it went up about 4 minutes ago, and that's the first time it's been dynamited.
Yeah, I think there's just been a
like
serious mismanagement of that black market this game. I mean, it is inexcusable that network viruses. There hasn't even been one used yet. Steph has bought one. He never used it, though. And revealing those off-worlds is also an important factor with the network virus. It is valuable to get rid of a hologram and shout to the rest of the game, hey, hit this thing. Because for one thing, I mean, they want to hit it. It's an off-world market, and it's not your off-world market. So it's really encouraging to go ahead and see other players hop in with you. Blues is going to clean this one up, no problem. Selling out of his own stock to make it happen. Not a
Yep.
big deal. Not going to repair the Offworld that got knocked down. He's going to be just fine. Good, solid win on over to Blues. That's how I would have called to win this one. Not really all that surprised, but we had a bit of a roller coaster of a game going on there.
Well, to be completely honest, I mean, I was thinking at HQ3 that Blues was just gonna majority buy everyone.
Yeah.
He had such a lead at that point. He had control over the water market, at least until Adderfield put those pumps down. And it looked like he was just going to steamroll. But that didn't end up happening. Steph came back into this game really well, and even Adderfield came back into the game really well. He was a factor in the late game, even though he made a bad decision in terms of stock.
Yeah, absolutely was a factor, which was a bit of a surprise. When everybody else is HQ5 and you're back on HQ3, even as an expansive player, nobody's really expecting a whole lot from you at that point. So it was nice to see Adderfield manage to come into things and become relevant later in the game. But of course, too little too late. Blues, even with that small, it felt like he hit a speed bump around HQ4, couldn't quite press onward to really take everybody out, but despite that, such a massive lead over everyone else that no one else was able to come back into it.
Yep, Sol 10, 4, 20. Is that the quickest of our games so far? I feel like it probably is.
I think of our games so far, it has been. One thing I want to point out about this game before we get out of here is I think the single largest mistake of this game was Adderfield buying out PB Head. I think that was the single worst mistake of this entire game. Because think about how valuable it would have been to have that scavenger player with you against an expansive with a lead, with a black market raid like this. EMPs are 14,000. This is like inexcusably low. Network viruses never even got used. I mean,
and not only that, I mean, just the fact that when you're in that position, you're obviously behind.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing you don't want to be doing is helping the leader get further ahead, and that was what Adderfield did with that buy.
Absolutely.
Blues was clearly the number one player at that point, had a whole bunch of money. If he doesn't get to that buy, if Adderfield doesn't make that purchase, then Blues has wasted a whole bunch of money, a whole bunch of time trying to buy PB Head.
Yeah.
Completely fruitlessly, and he's still back on HQ4, doesn't have any steel. Steel's really expensive, and is kind of stalled out a little bit in the mid game. Instead, he got basically half a subsidiary for free, and and that was the end of the game. Sort of, or at least it looked at the time like that was the end of the game.
Well, it basically was in a lot of ways. I mean, that stock price was just so high. We never, even though it took Blues a while to finish up the game, he never looked threatened. Not once did it ever look like he was in a position where he could possibly lose. And so, just really, really poor decision. This is something that I harp on a lot, and I know other players are trying to get it through to people too, but you got to identify who that leader is and focus your efforts on taking them down. There's no reason to help them out with their majorities if they're in a position like that with such a massive lead already.
Yep. And the result we expected, but perhaps not the way we expected it.
Expected? Yeah.
Yeah.